Good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is Andi Fouberg, and I'm the President and CEO of the SDSU Alumni Association, as well as the current chair of the Brookings Area Chamber of Commerce. Tonight is the third in a series of 5 opportunities hosted by the Brookings Area Chamber of Commerce in conjunction with South Dakota State University to hear from campus and community leaders about our Jacks Are Back and the Brookings Resiliency Collaborative, the planning groups working to bring students back to campus in Brookings safely. I am joined this evening by Brookings School Superintendent, Dr. Klint Willert, and Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at South Dakota State University, Dr. Dennis Hedge. Thank you both for joining us this evening. Like I said, this is the third of 5 campus community Zoom forums, and we hope you will join us for each of these. You can find this schedule as well as the video of previous conversations on the Chamber website, as well as SDSU's Jacks Are Back website. On August 5th, Brookings City Manager Paul Prezino and SDSU Vice President for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management Michaela Willis will return to discuss move-in events as we get closer to those dates. And finally, on Wednesday, August 19th, SDSU Athletic Director Justin Sell and Brookings High School Activities Director Randy Soma will discuss Jackrabbit and Bobcat athletics. Which brings us back to our guests this evening. We have a list of questions that have been submitted for our guests. If you have a question, please use the question and answer feature at the bottom, and we will answer those as time permits or at a future forum. Thank you again for joining us tonight. Provost Hedge, we're going to start with you. It certainly feels like a long time when you think back to March and the transition to finishing the semester. Before we talk about current planning for the fall, your thoughts about how the semester ended and how the university and students responded during that time.
Yeah, thank you, Andy, and good evening, everyone. It's great to join you this way. So yeah, even though it does feel like it's been quite some time, simply because so much has happened between March and now, it's really been only 4 months. So in many ways, not that much time either. But let me just start by saying that academically, really, the semester ended about as well as we possibly could have expected. I was so proud of the efforts of faculty members for immediately shifting and transitioning to remote education. The students handled it incredibly well. So really a true sense of pride in the way that the university responded. And again, that's faculty members, staff members, students, all across the board. Really was just fantastic. But I felt like we maintained high academic standards, continued to do everything we could to make sure that students had access to their courses, their course materials as necessary, which obviously was critical. But also then the other things that really happened. We made the announcements the students would not be coming back onto our campus. When they left for spring break, they felt like they would be back. So in addition to that, during that time frame, we've effectively worked with our students and families to make sure that they were appropriately and safely moved out of our residence halls. We had a virtual graduation ceremony because we really felt like it was necessary and critical that we celebrate the achievements of our graduating Jackrabbits. So really proud of that effort. Turned our attention now to new student orientation. So we've been very involved in that. A team put together a virtual new student orientation in a very short period of time, but it was very successful, has been very successful, continues to be. And now we really have our sights set on getting our students back on campus and doing so in a very effective way.
Great, thank you. Superintendent Willert, can you give us a little reflection on the conclusion of your school year? It was certainly interrupted as well.
Yeah, again, as Dennis has shared, first of all, thanks for having us and delighted to be part of this conversation and sharing a dialogue about where we've been and where we're going and what people can anticipate as we go forward. I know there's a lot of questions out there, and certainly it's a great place to start reflecting on where we've been. And as we concluded the year, I think it's really important to understand that we've, in a week's time, completely transformed our system into something that it was never originally designed to do. And that was completely deliver our instruction online and remotely to students as young as 5 all the way to as old as 20, 21 years of age. And that wasn't an easy task, but our teachers and our learning facilitators, our support staff really stepped into a space and embraced that opportunity. And equally, as Dennis said, I think things ended as well as they possibly could have. Our students realized that things were different, and they're probably going to be different going forward. Our students all equally had an opportunity to celebrate a high school graduation that was an epic event, one that I'm absolutely proud that we were able to have, and something that is certainly going to be memorable for years and years to come as we reflect back on how we concluded the 2020 year. But again, I really give a lot of credit to our staff for stepping into a space that they were unfamiliar with and utilizing the technology in ways that we've never done before, but have opened up a whole new world of possibilities for us equally as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Provost Hedge, as we look forward, why is it important to have students back on campus this fall?
That's a great question, Andy. And I'm going to start by just a simple but a very fundamental statement. Education, the work that we do, it's essential. It truly is. We're in an essential business. And when you think about, for us, and I'll let Klint visit about, K through 12, but for us, the work that we do on a college campus, when we think about the curricular, the co-curricular developmental activities that happen in preparing our graduates for personally and professionally rewarding lives beyond this college campus is again, it's just essential to the work that we do. And then fundamentally, when you start looking and thinking about it, many of our programs really do involve us needing to get together to develop team skills, to really do some face-to-face, hands-on, team-based type learning that despite the advances in remote education, you can't completely replicate. And again, that's just really why it's important for us to get back on campus and resume the very important work that we do. So I really do. I would just say the work that we do, it's essential. Those curricular and co-curricular activities, they are developmental. And when you even think about this, I mean, at some point we will emerge from this pandemic. And when we emerge from this pandemic, we want to make sure that we are strong. We want to make sure that our economy is strong. And one of the most important things that we can do, I believe, at South Dakota State University is to make sure that we're continuing to educate people so that they're ready to enter this post-pandemic workforce. And that means, our world, our state, our region, we need engineers, nurses, pharmacists, so on and so forth, all the way on down the line. So the work that we do is very important, and we need to stay at it.
Thank you. Superintendent Willert, as you consider the 2021 school year, how are you planning and your preparation processes? How are they going?
That's a really powerful question to ask as well, because it's a very dynamic process, needless to say. As we know, this situation is continually evolving, it's shifting, it's changing. There's new guidance coming forward on what seems to be a daily, if not almost hourly basis from different organizations that we're leaning into for guidance and support. Among those, the CDC, Center for Disease Control, the American Academy of Pediatrics. Equally, we're leaning into some guidance from our local health authorities, as well as the State Department of Health, State Department of Education. So our process has been very labor intensive. We fully anticipate that we're going to have a plan ready to present publicly on the 20th. We can get into some of those details a little bit later on, I anticipate, but we're going to share that on the 20th at a school board meeting with the idea that that's just what we're doing, sharing, revealing what our plans and our intentions are, and then allowing for some community input and feedback so that we can, again, be responsive and attuned to the needs of our students as well as our parents. As Dennis reflected on, though, it's very important that we do get back to business to the extent that we possibly can as usual. Education is so fundamentally important in the knowledge-based economy that we're in now. And we're not competing against Minnesota or Iowa anymore. We're competing on a global basis. And I think that's one thing that has really been illuminated through this whole process. And that starts foundationally in our system, the K-12 system, and just grows from that foundation as students advance onto the post-secondary institutions. And that's where I think from a broader scale, how we look at this foundationally and fundamentally, the long-term effect of this is something that we have to be mindful of, and we're trying to take into account in our planning efforts all those foundational skills that are so essential so that they're well prepared when they advance to the next stage in their educational career and endeavors.
Great. Provost Hedge, in our first campus community forum, President Dunn shared how it had been recently announced that the academic calendar would be adjusted to start 3 days earlier and have an on-campus instruction done by the Thanksgiving holiday, with finals being done then remotely. Now that time has passed, how has that impacted planning for an academic standpoint, and what challenges did you have to overcome?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and before I go completely there, Andi, just a real quick message about changing that academic calendar. When we were in the process of making that evaluation and providing input to the Board of Regents on that, two things really jumped out at us in terms of making that change. One is maintaining academic quality and having the full-on integrity of a semester, a fall semester. And we felt like the changes that were made really continue to enable that. And I can explain that in just a bit. And the other, as Klint mentioned, right? I mean, we're trying to do all of that, yet at the same time balance public health and safety, and do so and conduct our business in a way that really safeguards our university community, our local community, right? I mean, the entire area here. So those are really the overriding factors that went into making that move. Now, as far as actual changes, that in and of itself has actually been, in my opinion, fairly minimal in terms of the overall impact of planning. There are other things that I think have been far more impactful in terms of the decisions that we've really needed to make. But we're simply going to start a little bit earlier. We're gonna utilize those 3 holidays. We'll find ways to go ahead and honor and celebrate those holidays that we will be using. But Andi, when we finish up, we will have 70 on-campus instructional days plus 5 final exam days. So we'll have a full 75-day semester. That's really pretty normal for us. So we really didn't eliminate things. And that's when I go back to preserving that integrity of the semester. We were able to do that by making this. And again, I believe we'll operate in a much safer way in regard to hopefully mitigating spread of disease. So that's what we will be doing. But it will require students. We're going to move up some move-in dates. We were going to stagger those out a little bit more anyway, but it will require us to move that up just a little bit. And really, from a timing perspective, we'll be working with our students, for example, for that remote finals period. We'll be spending a lot of time visiting with them to make sure that they have access to all the resources and materials that they need in order to have a successful conclusion to that, to our academic semester. So we feel pretty good about where we're at. And again, overall, that part hasn't really impacted us too terribly much on the planning side.
Great. Superintendent Willert, as we just mentioned, SDSU has had to make some modifications to the school calendar. Do you anticipate any changes from the school district regarding the school year?
Yeah, it's been really interesting because on a weekly basis, we have a dialogue with the Secretary of Education, Dr. Ben Jones. And one of the things that had transpired earlier in those conversations was a discussion about actually going the opposite direction, deferring our school calendar, starting later to see what might transpire. And we actually called together our group of staff and walked through a process to analyze and assess if that was practical and feasible and some of the longer implications of that. And as we considered those options, it really drew us back to our existing calendar. And our existing calendar has us welcoming new teachers back on August 14th. And then following up very quickly after that into the next week's all staff, and then shortly thereafter all students. We do anticipate maintaining those dates. However, as will be presented Monday night at the school board meeting, doing some slight modifications to that particularly that first week, allowing for teachers that entire first week, because we do anticipate having to make some modifications in classrooms, spacing things so that we can adequately house our students with appropriate social distancing, taking into account all those factors that were mentioned about mitigating factors so regarding the disease spread. And then we're also talking about how we can prepare our teachers in the case that we need to go full remote again. And we want to make certain that in our calendar, we're embedding professional development opportunities and supports for our teachers, so that if we have to do that, there's a level of continuity in the instructional process, because the integrity and continuity of what we do with our students is absolutely essential and critical. So those are some of the things that we factored. So I do envision students might have a little bit later start, but the work in the school district will be going on no matter what, again, consistent with the days that are already projected on our school calendar.
Very good. Provost Hedge, let's talk about course planning, something that's a lot of work normally, but has been a lot of work in the last couple of months. It has been shared that some classes will be face-to-face, with some in a hybrid fashion, while others might be completely online. Can you share what are the key factors in determining how those courses will be offered?
Yeah, happy to do so, Andy. And again, we've done a lot of work, and we continue to do that work actually, and will for a few more days. But regarding a class, the face-to-face instruction, as opposed to maybe a hybrid approach or just moving something online, a few of the factors that again really were very important to us in making that determination. First off, let me visit a little bit about those that we really tried to do everything we could to identify a way to, as Klint had mentioned, socially distance within the classroom, but at the same time really enable those face-to-face opportunities. We really looked at those courses where student learning outcomes, the ability for us to teach to the highest level and achieve those student learning outcomes, we felt like really would be driven in a very solid manner, a strong manner, by the ability to have those face-to-face type encounters, those on-campus type encounters. So we really placed a premium looking at those student learning outcomes and trying to identify those courses that were really tied to that type of instructional endeavor and make sure that we put a high priority on them. I think the other thing that I would mention in terms of a very high priority, obviously we're in the business of student success. We desire our students to not only come to South Dakota State University, we want them to be retained at South Dakota State University, and we want them to earn their degree in a timely manner. That's the work that we do. So we really looked at those factors, Andy, that were directly involved, that we know are really impactful when it comes to retaining and helping students on that pathway to getting connected within their major. So many first-year seminar courses, various things like that we know really help students get grounded on our campus and find their way here at South Dakota State University, that that really put them on a positive trajectory to attaining that degree. And then there are a variety of other factors that come in when it came into the hybrid approach. As opposed to potentially moving something fully online. Again, it was simply evaluating all of this. But one of the things that really we were faced with as we, approached the need to, again, spread people out, utilize the appropriate social distancing within our classrooms, that for many of our large lecture classes, for example, they simply need to move online because we don't have enough classroom space in order to have those classes happen without completely disrupting schedules and doing other things. So there are some very practical reasons as well for why some things are moving more to an online. But that being said, we're trying to make sure, and I think that this is really important, even for those situations where we have a heavy element or a heavier element of hybrid, utilizing that technology to supplement face-to-face. I've said all along, and I think it's really important for us to understand, our goal, no matter what, even if a course has to move to online, is to have an on-campus experience for our students. So those courses, to augment them in such a way to where, again, we are supporting those students in meaningful ways on our campus, to have that off-to-college, on-campus experience is critical, even for those courses that we moved online, Andy.
So to that point, Dr. Hedge, I'm sure students are anxious to see their course schedule for the semester. Kind of how close are you to being able to release that information for students?
So yeah, we're getting close. I'll tell you exactly where we're at right now, Andy. So worked with the registrar's office and the dean. So we basically are in the process of really rebuilding our fall 2020 semester class schedule. So certainly a heavy lift, again, by some people that are doing really, really good work. So I appreciate their efforts. Right now, where we're at in the process is that information has been shared with the colleges and the departments or with the school directors and where we're organized the schools. And now we're dialoguing back and forth, finalizing that. And I think just within the next very few days, we'll have those drafts completed. And then the students, so if there are any students that are on here, you'll be getting a letter, a co-letter, I think, from me and Vice President Willis, kind of talking about some of these things that we're doing just within the next few days. Great.
Thank you. Superintendent Willert, you kind of touched on this, but at this point, has a final decision of action been made, adopted by the school board in terms of how the school will operate this fall? Or can you talk a little bit, you mentioned that, but can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah. I think it's appropriate to share the process and where we're at and what we anticipate as timelines currently and going forward. And I think it's appropriate to start backwards. And we've had these calls, as I've shared, weekly with the Secretary of Education. And most recently, on July 8th, we had a joint call with the State Department of Health along with the Department of Education. And that was really the first time that we've had any, I would say, more specific guidance that has been provided specific to the K-12 institutions, laying out what it is that the hopes are for moving into the new school year and how those things might happen as a direct result of the pandemic that we're facing. So we've taken that input, and I've worked very closely with our district-wide administrative team. We have a framework and a plan ready to present and to share. We'll actually be sharing that with a team of teacher leaders later on this week. I know it's a short week, and then we turn around on to next Monday, and it'll be presented publicly within the whole public specter of our community as a whole, so that people can really have an opportunity to visit and see what the plan is, hear exactly how we're moving forward, what the intentions are. But there'll be no call for action by the board at that point in time. It's a chance just to put it out for the public to have a chance to digest, review, ask some really critical questions, because we know and we've heard this time and time again how important and valuable it is to have an educational system in place that serves the needs of our students. But equally, we know that there's the residual impact to all the parents at home and how they're able to interact with their workplaces as well. So we want that feedback, and we'll carry that feedback to make the final revisions of our plan with the intent and hope that on July 30th, the plan will be placed before the school board for final action and adoption. Now, I will say I share all of that with a great big asterisk that says contingent upon what's to happen, because we know that, as I shared before, and Dennis, I know you said the same thing, this is an ever-evolving situation. There's ongoing changes. We know that it can be impacted greatly by what happens with the amount of community spread right here in Brookings and the extent that we are impacted here locally. So we're mindful of all that data and taking into account all those factors, but know that rightfully so, people deserve to have an answer and understanding of how we're planning to move forward. And right now, our plan does take into account a little bit of detail here, some of the factors that Dennis, you mentioned. Looking at three different options. One, and this is the best case scenario, obviously, is every student back where we were in early March before we had to vacate our buildings. That would be the most ideal situation. The other option is as we exited the buildings going 100% remote, and actually in practical application right now falling somewhere in between with some sort of a hybrid approach. And what we're exploring and examining and quite realistically maybe implementing as we enter into the school year is, for lack of a better way to define it, an A-B group, where we would do students, half of our student population, again, to appropriately social distance, half of our student population on a Monday, Tuesday, utilizing a Wednesday as a staff development, check-in day with our teachers, planning time, and then affording some cleaning time, deep cleaning, sanitizing, and then welcoming the second half of our students on a Thursday, Friday, and then replicating that during the course of the school year as long as we need to be in this hybrid approach. And again, that's all influenced by community spread and those impacts. So those are the phases that we're looking at, and certainly taking into account all the inputs that we need to make the best decision for our kids.
I appreciate both of you sharing kind of about the process, because there's lots of hard questions and no easy answers. And so I appreciate that. I also appreciate the amount of the data that's being used to kind of help make these decisions. Again, as you said, Dr. Willert, lots of things changing kind of constantly for us, moving maybe what we would call an end goal, but really appreciate you kind of sharing that. Provost Hedge, I want to turn a little bit to classroom and instructional lab environments. We'll have safety measures in place to ensure student and faculty safety. Can you touch on maybe some of the high points of those safety measures, how they're coming together, whether or not there's a capacity limit in each classroom, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So as has been mentioned, again, we're utilizing the best guidance from the Centers for Disease Control, the South Dakota Department of Health, and then also the other science that we can identify to really help us drive those decisions. One of the most important strategies as we approach the fall semester, of course, and is indeed de-densifying the populations within our classrooms and our instructional laboratory environments. So working with our facilities and services team, we have recalculated classroom capacities for all of our classes, all of our instructional labs on our campus, as well as other environments as well. The principles that we utilized, we of course utilized the full 6 feet social distancing between student desks, those kinds of things. For those that are very familiar with the SDSU campus, people know as well, we have fixed seating. So in the fixed seating environment, we also took that into account. We will take several seats out of play in those fixed seating environments to, again, make sure that we have a full 6 feet of distance between our students when we have them in our classrooms. In addition to that, though, we're also taking some added measures. We are applying several acrylic and or plexiglass type sheets in strategic locations in our instructional environments. We are making those types of shields, if you will, available for faculty members in our classroom so that they have the ability to be behind them. You can still see through them very, very well, but those are being installed and being put into our instructional environments right now. So we continue to do that, trying to provide a little bit more space too between the faculty member and then that first row of seats. So as opposed to doing 6 feet, the way we're setting up our instructional environments is about 10 feet. Again, there's some science behind that as well that we've used to guide our decision making. Also doing a lot to try to guide traffic and really control entry and exit of our classroom environments as well. And then I think the final thing that I would mention, and it's not so much related to the spacing, but it's also really important to our learning environments, and it's what we're doing right now. We have been working to add a lot of wide angle cameras, various things like that, to capture as much audio video as we can. That we feel like that's really important to help keep students going. We know that inevitably we will be faced with situations where students may need to quarantine or self-isolate. We see that as a strategy that as long as students are feeling well enough that we can keep them going in the classroom, just as an added instructional approach that our faculty members would have at their disposal to utilize.
Great. Dr. Willert, I want to follow up on something you said in the last section. You talked about the Monday, Tuesday, and then the professional day on Wednesday, and then possibly a Thursday, Friday. Will students be online for the other 2 days of the week, or is that kind of still being worked out to try to figure out what that looks like? Just some clarity to that last.
Yeah, absolutely, and we do envision that it will be direct instruction, and then leaning more heavily into the project-based approach to teaching and learning so that students do have some projects and work going on. One of the things that very realistically we know we can expect, because again, we believe in our teachers and our professionals to teach all day and then go home and flip open the laptop and continue the instruction for the remote learners during the day. One of the things that we'll actually be doing following the rollout of our plan on Monday night is submitting a survey out to parents and to community members and teachers as well, just to gather more input on their intentions, because there are some parents out there that are absolutely telling us that we need a remote learning option. They don't feel safe for a variety of reasons. Some may be somebody in their household that has an underlying health issue or concern. The child themselves may have an immune compromised system. So we want to provide that option, but equally we know that parents want face-to-face. We're trying to provide that option to the extent that we can as well. So yeah, that would certainly be the case.
So I want to follow up with just a little bit, because you the challenge for you really is you deal with students, as you said earlier, from that 5 to 20, 21 age group. So how are you factoring in safety measures for kind of the wide variety of age and experience that one has with students and staff in your schools?
Yeah, and then I guess very carefully might be the short answer, but certainly there's a lot more that goes into it. And I think probably the best way is just to start out a regular student's day and how that might look, because we do have the transportation services that we provide and welcoming students in and all those sets of things. So we've talked about how we can provide transportation services, loading buses from back to front, families together in the same seat so that we can put as many students as reasonably possible while still appropriately distancing on a bus. We're also exploring options to support parents transporting their own children to school, because the reality is, if anybody that's viewing is interested in a part-time gig, we're looking for bus drivers, because we may not have a full fleet capable because of a shortage of bus drivers, frankly, right now. So we're looking at that. Now, when students come to school, we are asking that parents will validate that they've done temperature checks and that students are certainly able health-wise to attend school. So we're putting some ownership and a partnership that's shared between the school district and the parents as we provide the educational services for the students. We will equip throughout the building monitors or thermometers for parents, or for teachers to do periodic checks if need be. We'll also have that staffed up with our nursing stations. We're going to be setting aside separate quarantining areas if a student is suspected of having COVID, that they would go to a nurse and then be separated from other students in the nursing center. And then it gets through the day. We're going to plan to leave doors open to the extent that we can, so that those high-touch areas, door handles, for example, aren't touched as frequently, trying to limit those things. We've done in-servicing of all of our custodial staff on cleaning protocols and processes and the equipment that we're using. We've also embraced the idea that for at least the first couple of months, and maybe in a longer term, some temporary additional custodial staff to assist with the cleaning, disinfecting of our spaces, bathrooms, so those high-touch areas. Lunchrooms, we believe we're going to be able to appropriately space students so they can have lunch. Many of our tables are large round tables, so we can seat students accordingly, and then overflow into some of our gymnasium spaces for lunchroom service areas as we need to provide for student lunches appropriately. Then throughout the day, obviously, we are going to continue the monitoring of students, again, making certain that they're healthy and maintaining that appropriate distancing. And then just as a means to help, again, with every effort, we know that fresh air is important. So we're doing strategically opening the air intakes of our buildings. That's the intent, so that we're getting more fresh air in, just again to keep that airflow. So there are little things that we're doing that are hopefully going to make a big difference in the long run, so that we can keep our students in the classrooms to the extent that we can for as long as we can. Because again, we know how important that is, and that continuity, integrity of the instructional process, working with that classroom teacher.
Thank you. A little bit of a hot topic, so I'll ask both of you this question. Will masks or face coverings be required to be worn by students, faculty, and staff? And Provost Hedge, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a common question right now. And for us at the university, I would just let you know that those discussions are currently occurring and ongoing right now with the Board of Regents. And so our work and what we're doing right now is, again, doing what, taking the steps that I described before and the other things to really balance public health and safety, and doing so within the guidance of the board. So we continue to get information and continue to have those dialogue, that dialogue. So I would just tell people to continue to kind of monitor. We always say, watch the Jaxerback site, watch email addresses, those kinds of things for those individuals that are employed by us or students of South Dakota State University for continuing ongoing guidance on that. But those conversations are occurring. Now, with that being said, I will go ahead and say, I strongly encourage, and our university really does strongly encourage the use of face coverings for those that are able to wear one. We understand that there may be some limits on that, but we do strongly encourage that. And again, I think, why do we say that? Again, we really believe that our best pathway to a successful semester, something we all really want here, right, is to be on campus, to mitigate the spread of disease as much as we can, really does involve us to utilize all the tools in the toolbox to help prevent spread and feel like that means, again, the appropriate hygiene, the social distancing, appropriate utilization of face coverings and various things like that. So that's where we're at right now within the regional system.
Superintendent Willert, same question to you. Face coverings? Well,
and a final decision has not been made. However, I will share that our plan will endorse the idea that face coverings are part of our plan. And it does go back to what Dennis just wrapped up saying, that we need to find ways to keep our students and our staff together as much as we possibly can. And if implementing a mandatory or required face mask is part of that process, and so be it. I think it's a prudent step that we can take, and it's one of many steps, obviously, that we would take to address the concern about keeping our students and our staff healthy. We do know that we have to make accommodations, obviously, because students that may be hard of hearing, we're looking at either face shields or masks that actually have a clear space. For students that are developing English skills as well, our English language learner students, we know that that's going to be important because so much of that skill set is learned by observing and watching an English speaker, their teacher, helping them learn how to articulate and state words. And so we know that there's going to be some variations within that plan, but again, that's the intent right now going forward. But certainly we'll be seeking and hoping to get more input from our community as we go forward. And again, hopefully this would be a short staying measure and one that isn't required long term as we navigate our way through a pandemic.
Thank you. Provost Hedge, we're going to change directions a little bit. What type of support and development is being offered to help faculty adjust to this new norm, I guess for like current norm, hopefully not new normal long term, but as they prepare for the fall semester?
Yeah. So, Andi, where we started, we talked about the abrupt transition to remote instruction. And really, we've had those ongoing efforts ever since that day occurred, really. And we began that process. So first of all, if I may, I just want to, again, say thank you to, all of the faculty members who have been involved in that, really working on continuing to modify their courses, be as flexible and as nimble as they possibly can be. And then again, our support people here on our campus, the folks in the Center for Enhancement of Teaching and Learning, the folks in Instructional Design Services, they've all been fantastic at that. So right as we moved into the summer, we had we made a variety of things available to faculty members. And really the primary theme actually was on being flexible and adjusting to this new environment to where, again, faculty members would be able to flex as they needed on pretty short notice between face-to-face type instruction as well and transition over to a more electronic utilization of more electronic type learning pedagogy. So we've really been working on that, flexibility. So our Center for Enhancement of Teaching and Learning, like I said, really has done a lot of work there, Instructional Design Services, and we continue to do that throughout the summer. So we started there beginning the summer. We've got faculty mentors that have really stepped up as well, helping their colleagues be as nimble as they can in terms of designing courses, but especially as we finish up into July and then into August. I just reviewed our upcoming list with instructional design our instructional design team, and we'll have many additional offerings all the way up to the start of our school year on August 19th, simply helping faculty members utilize best practices when it comes to blending and utilizing electronic modalities in their instruction.
As the non-doctor in the Zoom, I knew we'd hit pedagogy eventually. I don't understand it. I just love to say it. Superintendent Willert, say a similar question to you. How you talked a little bit about the importance of supporting teachers and staff in this upcoming year. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, and again, I cannot say enough the talent of our teachers to step into to the unknown, and all of us old Star Trek fans on here, to boldly go where no man or woman has gone before, I think is the theme that we entered into the remote world of teaching and learning here. And we know how important that is, again, in the knowledge-based economy and world that we're in today, that those skills are so fundamental. And it really does start with how well we support and prepare our teachers to act and work in that space. When we transitioned to remote learning, we did something that was a bit different than I believe virtually every other school district in the state of South Dakota. We took one full week and hit the pause button and said, staff, take time and prepare. And it really goes back to, I believe maybe Abraham Lincoln had made the comment, if I have a couple hours to chop down a tree, I'm going to spend the first few hours sharpening the axe. And that's what we wanted people to do, take time to prepare. And equally, that's what we're looking at doing this fall as we launch. And that's why we made the modifications, proposed modifications, if you will, to our calendar. We are moving to a common learning management system. When we say that, it's the methodology by which we would support our learners, whether they're face-to-face or in a remote learning environment. And it's a communications tool equally with the parents. We have made the strategic decision to go to a common universal district-wide learning management system. We need to provide our teachers time to learn how to utilize that system, and equally for our parents to understand how to access that system and our students to navigate that system as well. So that's why we talked about that in the calendar modifications that we talked about earlier, Andi. I think that's really important. Equally, this type of work has been foundational, I believe, and it's driven in our mission and vision statements, where we talk about how we are preparing our students as well as our staff to impact an ever-changing world. And if ever we are experiencing that, that's today. So we're just being true to our mission and our vision in terms of how we're working to prepare our staff and support our staff. And we've done that through our Wednesdays. People might often ask, well, what happens on those Wednesdays when students leave early and staff are left behind working? This is the type of thing we're talking about. We're asking key questions and really building that team around how do we provide that integrity and continuity of learning. And now it's a matter of transitioning that to the different modalities, whether, again, it's face-to-face, the hybrid approach, or some sort of variation remotely. And I think our staff have done a great job. We're giving them time, and we're committed to the professional development of our staff so that they can deliver on those expectations and the promise that we've made to give our kids a high-quality educational experience.
Thank you. Provost Hedge, as a former dean of pharmacy, you're very familiar with the important academic success in clinical and field-based instruction. Certainly a lot of students at research farms and hospitals and pharmacies. What type of provisions will you need to make for those students?
Yeah, I think it starts really with flexibility. And what I would say about that is, we made adjustments to our fall semester calendar, but at the same time, we know we need to be flexible in order to allow the students that are in those programs to be in the field at those sites in order to complete the hours that they need to complete working with those sites to meet those accreditation requirements, the program requirements, and so on and so forth. So for me, really, those types of programs and really the dynamic in the world that we're working in right now does require flexibility. It requires the ability to be nimble. It requires the ability to adjust schedules as we need to. So again, Andi, you had mentioned, like a clinical place. If we lose access to a clinical site, the ability to be nimble and adjust off of that to do what we can to continue to get students placed in the environment so that we meet, again, those accreditation and those program outcomes. So I really think it starts with flexibility. Once you get beyond that, certainly every student that we put out in the field, in those clinical environments, so on and so forth, we'll make sure that they have the adequate PPE and other things, working with those sites to ensure, to the best of our ability, their own personal health and safety. That obviously is really at the top of my priority list when it comes to me doing my job right now. It always is, actually. I shouldn't say right now, because that's always really at the top. But certainly that's first and foremost. We think about those things as well as making sure that our students have the tools that they need in order to go into those environments and be successful. And then finally, again, I'll just kind of circle back. That's working with the sites, doing everything we can within SDSU policy, CDC guidance, South Dakota Department of Health guidance, to make sure that we're following all of the appropriate rules and protocols that are in place.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Willert, you touched a little bit on transportation and food service and some other areas, but what about kind of extracurricular or co-curricular, maybe even recess? I'm the daughter of a retired kindergarten teacher. Recess is important. So what can parents expect?
Yeah, and again, great questions related to all those kind of extracurricular and co-curricular events. And we know that those are really extensions of the classroom, including recess, because you learn how to work together by playing nice in the sandbox, right? And that starts at a very young age. And we know that we're going to have to make some adjustments accordingly and do so in a way that makes sense, that's practical. But we don't want to steal the childhood experiences that occur on a playground from our kids. So we'll be working with our teachers and our students to really talk about what is appropriate, what kind of games can occur, what are the spacings that need to occur. And I know, as I've watched videos and reflected on what's happened to some of our school districts across the country and even across the pond, when we look at Europe, for example, they've talked about doing games and then sanitizing balls and handling things differently in terms of how shared equipment is utilized and cleaned and sanitized after utilization, again, just to ensure that we're taking all those precautionary measures in mitigating the spread of the disease. Now, with the co-curricular and extracurriculars, there are some discussions about how we need to space accordingly, because the challenge with that is we don't want people to be close together, but how do choirs and bands best perform right beside each other? So we know that we have some factors to sort through yet. We're looking to the South Dakota High School Activities Association for further guidance when it comes to those extracurricular activities, our fall sports season, for example. And we're even talking longer term about how this might impact us into the winter seasons when you start getting more of those enclosed spaces, the girls and men, or men's and women's basketball or wrestling, for example. So those are yet to be decided. I don't have a definitive answer yet. I know that you have Randy Somer, our Director of Activities, coming on later on to talk about those things, as well as Justin Sell. And ideally by later part of August, we'll have some more clarity from the South Dakota High School Activities Association on what is and what is not acceptable and feasible, both from a participant standpoint as well as an observer or spectator standpoint. And that's one of the things we've talked about, just so people are aware. What happens if a community, let's say Huron, has a widespread issue when we don't in Brookings, and we're scheduled to play a football game on Friday night? Do we limit Huron fans from coming to Brookings to watch their children play in a sporting event? So there's some very complex questions that need to be resolved yet. I guess if North Dakota is coming to town, we can say, no, you're not welcome, but that's a whole nother discussion on another day.
We try to say that every year. It doesn't have to be a pandemic for that, Dr. Willert. I couldn't
resist. I'm sorry.
Not a welcoming community. My apologies, everyone. Provost Hedge, we'll have Dr. Willis join us again in a couple of weeks, where she'll update us on residential life and also about student activities and how those will occur during the academic year. But is there anything you can share at this point in terms of an update on that planning? Kind of where is Jaxer-back committee and some of those kinds of things on that?
Yeah. So I'll just start by saying, the co-curricular activities like Klint just talked about, the other aspects of of university life, of campus life. Those are very important to the overall campus experience, the university experience that our students want, need, and really we're committed to delivering. So I'll start there. That being said, again, we have to go through processes, make sure we're doing so in a very safe and health conscious manner, and that's the work that we're doing right now. We actually have many plans that are being reviewed right now by the Jacks Are Back Task Force. So we're going through all of that, trying to figure out ways to, again, smartly provide those opportunities, but again, do it in a smart and very responsible manner, to where, again, we want to make sure that we can continue to offer those kinds of activities and experiences. That's first and foremost on our minds. So Vice President Willis, when she's here, I think in a couple of weeks, she should be able to provide a more definitive answer on that. But we currently have many plans right now that we're reviewing.
So you both kind of alluded to or touched on fine arts, and it's the theater and dance and music. They play a critical role in both the university experience and the school district. So kind of where do we stand in band and dance and choir and for both, and how will the Oscar Larson Performing Arts Center be utilized in the coming year? Provost Hedge, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So again, a great question, and luckily we've got very good people working on that right now. So we'll start there. It's been mentioned already a couple of times during our conversation here this evening. Following the information that we have available to us through the best science that becomes available on these kinds of topics, following CDC guidance, following Department of Health guidance, and those kinds of things. And that's, again, really where we're at. I think one of the things that we're really leaning into right now, and I give great credit to Dean Sargent and David Reynolds, the director of the School of Performing Arts, and they've really been looking at studies that have been performed related to the performing arts. Just this week, there's information from two lead researchers that began to emerge here. One of those researchers at the University of Colorado, the other at the University of Maryland, and we're utilizing that to really guide our decision making. So we're in the process then, therefore, of planning, utilizing that best practice information that's emerging right now. And again, we're right with you. I mean, we know that the value of the performing arts, we know how important that is. We know how meaningful that is to our students that come onto our campus and are here at South Dakota State University. So we're committed to being as creative as we possibly can be, but there will be change. Our goal will be to hopefully offer appropriately socially distanced opportunities so that individuals can participate in a live manner. But then we'll also have to look for other creative ways of providing those performance opportunities, because we know how meaningful they are, not just to the people in the local community, but to parents and grandmas and grandpas and others. We want to make sure that they get an opportunity to experience their loved ones performing as well. So we're looking at live stream opportunities and various things like that. So we're continuing to evaluate our situations. And again, it's really being directed largely by these studies that are right now emerging.
Great. Dr. Willert, similar question to you in regards to, you touched a little bit on the performing arts, but you want to elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, just real briefly. Again, we know how important those events are, and as we reflect back on alumni coming back to the school district to visit, oftentimes those extra and co-curricular events are the things that they reminisce about the most, and there's many life skills and life lessons that are learned through those extensions of the classroom, and as Dennis articulated so very well, it's so important that we provide those opportunities. And again, it's going through a process to determine how to do that safely and appropriately, but yet still have meaning in the experience. And we'll have to wait for a little more guidance from the South Dakota High School Activities Association on how we can do that. And equally, we know that we're partners with SDSU on how some of the spaces are utilized. the football stadium and the Performing Arts Center. We know that we're great partners working together and how we utilize those spaces, and to the extent that we can use those spaces not only for the performers, but also for those spectators that come and enjoy those events with their children, and likewise. And doing the streaming events, those type of opportunities are all things that we've explored and examined as well. So still more to come on that, but again, we have a commitment to provide, to the extent that we can, quality experiences in each of those extra and co-curricular areas.
As a former marching band member, I should remember what the distance is between players, but it's very noticeable when you aren't socially distancing appropriately in marching band. So I'll just leave that out there. Dr. Willert, we had a question come in, and I think this is probably a question for maybe a little bit for both of you, into the Q&A, and it talks about, we kind of moved to some pass-fail situations in grading at the end of the semester in recognition of just maybe some of the challenges that were there. So Dr. Willert, we'll start with you. Do you have any plans to adjust grading in the semester at this point? And again, we know how much things may change, right? But at this point, are you planning any sort of adjustments to grades?
A great question. And I envision that we'll go back to the way that our grading structures were prior to going into the remote learning. We knew that there were some real challenges, and that's why we did make some transitions to some pass-fail type grades. I do envision that we're going to go back to our standard grading processes. And I can't say that it's a letter grade system, because universally it's not. We have some standard-based grading that occurs in our elementaries. We do more of the traditional letter grading system, and that's in large part because of our student aspires to go to a university system where letter grades are accounted for in GPAs, those types of things. So I do see us going back to where we left off prior to entering into our remote learning environment.
Provost Hedge, I'll just throw the question at you as well.
Yeah, my answer is basically the exact same. We anticipate going right back to our traditional grading system that we utilize, and really looked, I'm proud of the decision. I think we made the right decision when we came up with the alternative grading option this last spring semester. But again, that was really driven by that very abrupt, immediate transition to remote learning. Here, I feel like the factors are a little bit different going into this, obviously, and therefore we would anticipate going back to our traditional system.
Great. Provost Hedge, one last question for you, and that's at the beginning of the year is such a busy time on campus. One of those areas is the Faculty Fall Conference the week before classes and convocation, where we formally welcome students to SDSU. Do you have plans for how those will be handled this year yet?
Yeah, we are, and actually our plans become more and more solid all the time, and we have a pretty good idea of exactly what that will look like. I think for all of us, for both me and Klint, when we kick off our academic years, it's a very special time. There's nothing quite like watching a college campus come back to life. It's very special, and it'll be special again this year. It'll look different, it'll feel a bit different, but it's still going to be special, and we're committed to making sure that happens. For our kickoff, the way we will do that, we're going to see a bit of a blended approach to some of our traditional events. And I'll give you an example of that. Our fall conference, which always is a very important day where we talk about some very meaningful themes that we're really trying to introduce in the classroom and things like that. We're gonna have a fall conference, but it will really be virtually this year. So we're gonna have that virtual event. Our theme actually will be supporting students during challenging times. Couldn't be more fitting, right? So I think a very important message for us, and but we're gonna approach that virtually. As we kick off our academic year, we welcome new faculty to our campus. So we'll have new faculty orientation. We're actually going to have that. Right now, we're planning for that being a live event. So we will appropriately social distance. We've got small enough numbers of faculty, and we've got venues that enable that. So we really are going to do that. And again, I really look forward to welcoming new faculty members to campus. Again, it'll look and feel a bit different, but nevertheless, it'll be an opportunity for us to get together. And I look forward to that, albeit, again, at least 6 feet apart. And then maybe the last thing that I would just mention too, for our students, one of the very special special events we have to kick off our academic year is our all university convocation. So it really is. It's a kickoff event for us, but also a welcome to our freshmen that are coming in. And I'm going to circle back to one thing that I've mentioned probably once or twice here, is that off to college experience. We're really working hard to make sure that we maintain that. Historically, we've had that event in Frost Arena. Everybody's there together. What we are working to do this year is change a venue. As long as the weather allows, we're looking at Dana J. Dykehouse Stadium. We're going to separate the groups up into two. But again, we feel like that's really important because we want those students, and we're confident we can do this in a very safe and effective way, that we want them to have that welcome to South Dakota State University greeting that again really is important to them, but it's also important to us as we kick off our year. So you'll see some blended approaches. And again, I say this often, it'll look different, but still those things are so important to what we do. We're committed to making them happen.
Think students coming back to Brookings is exciting. Students going back to the school district is exciting. So Dr. Willert, do you want to think out loud a little bit about that too?
Yeah. Again, it's a magical thing when you're a college student, but I think you can go all the way back to how magical it is when you're a kindergartner and you're walking through the door and everything's new and fresh and exciting. And whether you're a kindergartner, a senior in high school, or a freshman in college, or soon to be graduate from college, each of those mark a monumentous event in the life of an individual. And I think we can all relate to that because we all probably have pictures hidden somewhere of our mom watching us grab the door handle on our first day of school somewhere. And we know how important that is. And we want to strive to provide as many of those experiences as we possibly can. Maybe it'll look, as Dennis said, a little bit different, feel a little bit different. But we want to keep that magic alive and recognize how very important it is that these events that are occurring aren't forgotten, that they're celebrated, that they're recognized as exactly what they are, monumentous events in an individual's life and their development as they're growing into the individual that they're becoming and the career paths that they're ultimately going to choose. So we're committed to provide a great experience for our staff, equally a great experience for our students and our parents. And that's why during our calendar change, one of the things that we've talked about is giving that high-touch experience, welcoming parents and students, individual appointments with teachers so that they have that high-touch, personalized experience, welcoming them back to the Brookings School District for the 21-22 school year. 2021.
Everyone's favorite day on Facebook is first day of school, right? So everybody's seeing the first day of school photos. That kind of brings us to the end. I'll just throw it open in case either of you has any kind of final comments. Provost Hedge, anything?
You know what? I just wrap up very quickly. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be on this evening and to share the work that's being done across our campus. I know Klint, I'm sure, feels the exact same way. Again, as we've mentioned before, I'll just wrap up by saying, again, I think we're all in this together. We know that. Again, I feel really good about the planning effort that's going on, but it's going to take teamwork. It's going to take partnership. It takes all of us doing our part. But if we approach this the right way, I'm confident that the planning that we're doing right now will yield the results we want, which would be a good, strong academic year for us, whether that be at the university or within the Brookings school system.
Great, thank you. Dr. Willert, any final remarks?
Yeah, just again, I want to say thanks for the format and the venue, the opportunity to share what's happening, because I know people are very interested. I think people have really come to realize and understand, and I know it's not unique to Brookings, how very valuable the educational experiences for our children, K to 16 are, and how important that is for our world as a whole. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Andi, thanks for facilitating this process. And Dennis, great to share the space with you this evening and the community as a whole. Just a couple of other thoughts. I would just encourage everybody, continue to be patient. There's a lot of very well-intended people trying to do the very best they can with the information they have, when they have it, and make decisions in a timely and thoughtful way. and sometimes being thoughtful and timely don't necessarily coincide with each other because people want answers yesterday, but we're all doing the very best that we can. And we want to provide a quality experience and provide that experience in a way that's meaningful and intentional for our students. Again, K-16, I would argue. So again, I just appreciate the opportunity. I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't close out my comments by saying we're going to get through it together. And remember, it's a great day to be a Bobcat.
Excellent. Well, neither of your jobs is easy under normal circumstances. So thank you both for the work that you have been doing and for joining us this evening. Big thank you also to SDSU Director of Marketing and Communications, Mike Lockram, and President and CEO of the Brookings Area Chamber of Commerce, Kelsey Doom, for their assistance in putting together this event. Our next forum will be August 5th, and guests will be Brookings City Manager Paul Brazino and SDSU Vice President for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management, Michaela Willis. For more information on Jacks Are Back, please visit the website sdstate.edu/Jacks Are Back. Thank you all for joining us this evening with Loyal Heart So True. Go Jacks.
Go Jacks.
And Bobcats.
Good night, gentlemen.